World Chess Championship game number 8. We have Liren with the white pieces, Jan Nepomniachtchi with the black pieces. We got another exciting game for you guys. We see d4 by Ding, knight f6 by Jan. And after c4, e6, Ding plays knight c3, inviting the Nimzo Indian. Bishop b4, e3, castle. This is all standard. Now we see a3 by Ding, a little bit of a rare move, but we still have 850 games in the database. And the idea is he's allowing bishop takes c3, b takes c3, which happens in the game. And now we get this imbalanced position, so there's better winning chances for both sides when you have these kind of imbalances. We see the double pawns for white and the bishop pair. So the bishop pair is usually a strength. Double pawns are usually a weakness. All right, so how is Jan going to fight against this big center that Ding has? He starts with d6. And a lot of times what you'll see in the Nimzo Indian is black will trade off that dark square bishop, and then they try to put their pawns on dark squares. So it could be c7, d6, e5, maybe this pawn on b6, this pawn on a5. Then eventually you want to fight against these double pawns. If you can blockade that pawn on c4, which we're going to see coming up, that's one of the best ways to play against the Nimzo Indian. Knight to e2. And there was a recent game here, Jacobian and Caruana in this position in a blitz tournament, over the board blitz tournament in St. Louis. And Caruana went on to win that game with the black pieces. c5. So now we see that blockading of the isolated, well, not yet isolated, but could be later, the doubled c pawn. Knight g3, knight c6, rook a2. This has been played in 2 games, John Burke and Jacobian. And the idea is the rook can swing across the second rank to help defend the king and maybe come to the center to help with pushing these central pawns. Now the plan for Jan is to play against that c4 pawn like we talked about. Look for knight a5 to come soon. e6. There's the strategy. All the pawns on dark squares. Look for bishop a6, knight a5, put pressure on that pawn on c4. e4 by Ding, bishop a6, bishop to g5. And here Ding does need to play active, because if he plays too calm, what's going to happen is Jan is going to be able to take advantage of this weakness we've been talking about. Play rook c8, play c takes d, and the position is going to be close to winning for Jan. So Ding needs to play with active piece movement. And after h6, he goes h4. It's the only good move in the position. So he couldn't allow this c takes d, rook c8 stuff. He's playing aggressive. And now Jan grabs the piece. This was not required, but he goes for it. So all of a sudden, a quiet Nimzo Indian really livens up h takes g, and Jan Nepomniachtchi is up a piece for a pawn. And now the threat is to play e5, take the knight, bring the queen out to h5, and go for a checkmate. g6 played. So there wasn't really a way to save the knight because of the checkmate threats. So Jan allows this knight to be captured, brings the queen out next, and we're back to equal material. Pawn to e5. This is a nice idea by Ding. And after d takes e5, excellent move, trying to open up the center, get at Ding's king. Ding goes d5. Aggressive again. He does not take the pawn back. He's pushing the pawn. And the idea is he's trying to create a pass pawn here, even though he knows that he is down a pawn. Knight e7. And here Jan is threatening to play e takes d5. So Ding needs to push that pawn again. d6. And a pawn like this can be a blessing or a curse. The strength of this pawn is that it's a pass pawn and it's only 2 squares from queening. That can cause some major headaches for black. The weakness of this pawn is there's no pawns next to it to defend it. So black could play, let's say, rook to d8, knight f5, and try to win that pawn. So it can be a strength, can be a weakness. Knight f5, there it is. Putting the pressure here. And this has been a very high-level game so far. We're 17 moves in. Neither player has made a mistake. Neither player has made an inaccuracy. So let's see what happens. Knight to e4, attacking the queen, guarding the pawn. Queen to d8. And the position is dynamically balanced so far. Things are about to spice up soon, though. We are going to see a blunder coming up in the next few moves. Queen to d3. So the idea is queen to h3, and then there's the threat of queen h7 mate or queen to h8 mate. King g7, the only good move by Jan, and the idea is the rook comes over to the h file to help defend against mate. Pawn to g4. Ding is playing aggressive, trying to kick this knight. Now Jan makes a brilliant move, and it's the best move on the board. So like we talked about, super high level chess through 20 moves, bishop to b7. And the idea is if Ding takes, g takes f5, Jan takes back with the e-pawn, the knight on e4 is pinned to the rook on h1. This is a much better position for black. So bishop b7, and Ding cannot take that knight. It's not a good move. He plays rook to h3. That gets the rook off of this diagonal, renews the threat of taking the knight. And now knight to h4 by Jan. And this is a good move. And the idea is he might play f5 next. So even though this is moving a pawn near the king, because Jan has 4 pawns on the king side to Ding's 2, and this king is also in the center, a strategy for Jan here is let's start pushing the king side pawns. Okay, g5 by Ding. This prevents pawn to f5 because there's en passant with check, and it's defended by the knight. Now we see the first blunder of the game. Bishop takes e4. This is a big mistake. The best move to hold equality is rook to h8. And it looks like rook to h8 would be an easy enough move for a super grandmaster to find, but the problem is when the position gets so tactical. As viewers, we can have the engines or a whole team of commentators looking at the board. When the position gets this tactical, it's very hard to play precise moves, and this whole game is filled with brilliancies and mistakes and blunders back and forth. Like the game is getting crazy starting here. So bishop takes e4 played, first blunder of the game. Queen takes e4, and black lost that really strong bishop cutting all the way across the board. White takes back, and now white has a passed d-pawn and an h-file to attack on, and this g-pawn doing a nice job guarding f6 and h6, so maybe queen takes e5, and there's some sort of mating net coming up. So how does Jan defend against all of these threats? He decides to play knight to f5. So the idea here is he's not taking this pawn. If queen takes e5, he can block with f6, and he wants to try to win the d-pawn. Rook to d2 by Ding. Excellent move. He's defending the d-pawn with tactics. So if knight takes pawn, there's queen c6, and the rook is pinning the knight to the queen. Rook h8 played. Takes. And now Ding makes his first mistake of the game. He plays pawn to d7. So what would be better than pawn to d7 here? This is with the help of Stockfish. Rook to d3, threatening rook to h3, guarded by the bishop. So for example, if rook d8, rook h3, and now queen takes e5 is coming next with check. This is close to winning for Ding. It's a very large advantage. Instead, Ding plays d7. He's still in the driver's seat. He still has an advantage. Jan finds the best move, rook to d8, and now we're actually closer to equal than we are to winning territory for Ding. Queen takes e5 check, king sidesteps, and here we're at move 28. Ding repeats this position a couple times, knowing that Jan has to go back and forth. And the reason for this is they need to reach move 40 to get bonus time. Both players have about 25 minutes, and Ding knows that he had time pressure issues in the last game especially, but he's also just been lower on time in all of the games. So he repeats a couple times and then plays queen c7. So what that does is it just buys him a couple moves to get closer to that bonus time. So now Ding's playing the strongest move, queen c7. And here, this is showing one of Jan's weaknesses. And I don't know how actively the players are thinking about strengths and weaknesses of their opponents, but Jan does not like sitting back and waiting in a passive defensive position. So that's a strength of a player like Sergei Karyakin, for example, who played in a previous World Championship match against Magnus. Jan cannot sit and wait. He plays an active move, queen to h4, and it's another blunder. The rook on d8 is hanging, and Ding should take it. Queen takes d8. So why wouldn't Ding take that rook? Well, there's a couple factors at play here. Both sides are down to around 25 minutes. We still have 8 moves to go, 9 moves to go. And Ding is probably thinking, let's trust Jan's calculation here. Jan sees there's a perpetual check if I take the rook on d8. But there's actually not a perpetual check. It's hard to see, but there's enough time that Ding could have figured it out. He definitely could have figured it out. I mean, he had those beautiful rook and knight checkmate combinations just a couple moves ago. If queen takes d8, queen e4 check, the rook can block. Now there's only one good check for black. King moves. Only one real check for black. King moves up. Again, only one check. Rook blocks. This gives up the bishop. Now king d2. Only one real check for black. King c1. Now you can throw in one more check, maybe queen f1, queen f4. The king can hide on b2. This is already a checkmate in 11 with best play. That's completely over. Ding is winning. That was not too hard to calculate for a player of Ding's level because there was essentially one check each move for black. So all you have to do is find the route for white to figure out that you're going to get out of this safely and end up checkmating black. Instead, though, he plays king to d1, a blunder back, and I think it was just a time factor. He was afraid of getting too low on time. Because you don't want to calculate for 15 minutes out of your 22 minutes and then figure out that it is perpetual, because then you still have to find moves for the rest of the game, right? You still have 8 more moves. So queen takes g5 played, removing that pesky pawn, also defending the rook on d8. King c2. Now this is interesting. The commentators mentioned this on the live broadcast. A plan for Ding here could be to walk the king all the way up the board on the light squares, and that king could end up being the piece that wins Ding the endgame. Queen to e7 played, a bit of a mistake. The strongest move was to play queen to h4. We're getting a little bit nitpicky here, but the idea is the king is better placed on e7. The knight guards d6, so there's no queen d6 check. But that would be the ideal setup. King on e7 and use the queen to play active. So now Ding plays bishop to g2. Another question mark, and we have the engine to help us, but the whole idea here of king b3, king a4 is the way to play for a win, and Ding does not go for it. He instead plays bishop to g2. I think what he wants to do is put the bishop on c6 to guard his pawn, and then try to grab these pawns with the queen. Pawn to e5 by Ding, or by Jan, excuse me. Again, sharp position, 6 moves to go. Another mistake by Jan. The move here to hold equality is a brilliant move. If you want to try to spot it, pause the video. The move that he needs to play is knight to d4 check. And after c takes d4, rook takes d7. And we're going to see this theme a couple times in the endgame, where if Jan can sack his knight for a few pawns and have like 3 pawns against the bishop, that can be a way to hold an equal position. So now when the queen retreats, queen to f4, we have c takes d4, rook takes, and now there's another brilliant move, queen takes a3, sacrificing the rook. And if rook takes back, queen a4 check, winning the rook back. And in the end, material's even, 3 pawns for a bishop, and this is draw territory. So what a resource for Jan. That one was not easy to see though. Knight to d4 check. It would have been a brilliant move. So e5 played, bishop to e4, and Ding is back with the clear advantage now. And the threat here is bishop takes f5, removing the knight. So Jan brings it back, knight to h6. He is up a pawn, and here Ding should play queen takes a7, which he does. Knight to g4. So what Jan is trying to do is drum up a little counterplay. The knight and queen could become dangerous for Ding once they get active. Like if f3 is played, for example, and knight to e3 check, all of a sudden this king is on the run and this queen might be able to sneak in from behind. Bishop f3, a blunder by Ding. So he has a winning position here. He has to figure out how to convert it. And the problem with bishop to f3, Ding missed this, is there's knight takes f2. A brilliant move by Jan. So again, we see this knight for pawn sacrifice. It's winning the f2 pawn and the d pawn. Then we're going to have 3 pawns against a bishop in the end. Rook takes f2, pawn to e4, top move in the position. The pawn is ready to go to e3. We have triple connected passed pawns. Now we're in close to equal territory. The computer says 0.00, so with best play, this is a draw. Rook to e2, pinning that pawn to the queen. f5, queen takes b6, and rook takes d7. So now there's really not a lot that bishop can do. So the best thing to hope for white is a draw. You can trade the bishop for a couple pawns and reach an equal queen and rook with 2 pawns each endgame. I guess white would have 3, but they'd be these doubled pawns. So queen b8, queen d6. They trade queens. We see the pawns trade for the bishop. king f6, rook e8. This is a draw agreed. There is some calculation here, but the players both figured out this was a draw. The computer says it's a draw, but the whole idea is this king can try to march up with this pawn. This king can try to march up with this pawn. In the end, though, the rooks can sacrifice for the pawns, and the timing is about even, so they end up drawing. All right, so draw agreed. Crazy game today, though. Jan is still up 1 game in the match, and we will be back tomorrow for a game recap as soon as the game ends, so make sure to subscribe. And if you're interested in getting your game analyzed, we have a game analysis coming up on Saturday. It's a live stream. Submit your game with the links in the description. And if you don't want to submit a game, hopefully we'll see you there to just enjoy the show. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next recap.